Well, hey everyone, I am super excited to bring you today's episode of the Let Love Begin podcast. Today I'm speaking to Dr. Julie Shafer. Julie is a Portland psychologist and wrote her book, Loved, Relationship Rules for Women Who Thought They Knew the Rules. After 2 decades of working with women on their relationships and going through a few struggles of her own, Julie's work and writing focuses on connecting with others you want and deserve, whether with an intimate partner, friend, or a family member. Julie has a PhD in clinical psychology from Ohio State University and has helped hundreds of people improve their relationships and life through her down-to-earth and personal style. I really love this conversation with Julie. There's a lot of really actionable, helpful advice today. So yeah, I'm excited to hear what you guys think of this one. And as always, take what works for you and of course, leave what doesn't. Enjoy. This is Let Love Begin, a podcast for the recovering brokenhearted, ready to heal and reclaim their enthusiasm. Well, hey there, it's Talia here, and I wanted to let you know that I started this podcast when I went through my most significant breakup. And what really helped me at the time was listening to other people's stories of healing and how they transformed through their breakup. That really helped me understand what I was going through and really gave me hope that I could get there too. Before this podcast, I created an online summit where I interviewed 21 experts talking about different aspects of breakups and how we can let go of our ex and begin to open our hearts again. It's called the Let Love Begin Summit. And if you're interested in watching or listening to the summit, you can go to rebellove.com/summit and use the code podcast for 20% off. It's usually just $21, which is $1 per interview, but you can get it for around 16-ish using the code podcast. I hope you get as much out of it as I got making it. Okay, back to the episode. Welcome, Dr. Julie, to the Let Love Begin podcast.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited to speak to you today. Today, we're going to talk about, can I transform? Or we're going to ask the question, can I transform my current relationship? So before we get started, I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about your journey through becoming a psychologist and the books you've written, and let's go from there.
Yeah. Well, it's been a fun journey. I didn't go back to college until 11 years after high school. And so by the time I was really studying this stuff, I had some experience under my belt. I had a divorce and then I was remarried, and grad school was a lot of work. And then after that, I opened my practice and I've been working with individuals one-on-one. Strangely enough, I don't do couples work very often, like almost never. But I work with individuals around how can they do their relationships better. And
Right.
I've been doing that for 15 plus years now.
Right.
Yeah.
What is the most common kind of problems you encounter if you're working with people one-on-one? Obviously, something's kind of gotten bad where they're,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm unhappy and I don't know why is like the starting point, right?
Right.
This isn't working. I'm fighting with my partner all the time. I don't feel connected to him or her. I tend to work with women mostly, but I do have men that come to me occasionally. So I'll probably say she as my client when I'm talking.
Okay.
But a lot of this will apply both ways. But they're fighting and they don't understand why, and they've tried to fix it, and it's like it's not working, and they don't get why it's not working. And that's the starting point.
Is there like a, this is kind of like how long is a piece of string question, but is there like a common or a typical time into the relationship that they come to you, like 3-year mark? Or
I don't know what the research says about this, but I kind of feel like there's 5 to 7 years.
Right.
And then there's there might be a 10-ish year, but then it's again at 15, 16 years. I kind of feel like people are saying, wait a second here, I'm no longer being connected. And, and especially if they've had kids and life has been about working and raising the kids. And now the kids are starting to be on their own, even if they haven't left the house. And that can really highlight the fact that you aren't feeling as connected to your partner anymore.
Yeah. And when the people come to you to start working on their relationship, are they kind of in the mindset of like, I'm going to leave and I want your support in that? Or are they like, I want to stay. How do I work through this?
I think mostly they want to stay. Sometimes they get to the point where I just can't do this anymore and I think I have to leave. But mostly, and I'm always a little surprised actually at how hard people will work at relationships. And that really gives me hope for any relationship that's struggling, that neither partner really wants to leave. And so what can we do to make this better? And it can be a bit of a slog.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is interesting. You said you typically work with one person in the relationship. So how do you kind of foster healing or like mending of a relationship or growth with only one person?
Yeah, it can be tricky. And a lot of times my goal is to get the couple into couples therapy.
Right.
Because once they get into couples therapy, they can really start addressing the issues. Working one-on-one with somebody, it's really having to focus on them and their issues, which is hard because when we're coming because we're unhappy with our relationship, we're focused on our partner and how he or she isn't showing up in the relationship. And so it's all about them, right?
Interesting.
And it's hard to get the focus back on ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Which is
Yeah.
really the only place where change can take place.
Exactly.
That's interesting. So you're saying that typically people will come to you in kind of a blaming manner?
Well, you know what, it is blaming, but I don't think they're doing it with it's not my fault, it's all your fault, I'm blaming you for the problem kind of. I think what they're noticing, because what our brains are structured to detect threat. And so if there's a problem or something threatening out there, like, I'm not feeling connected to my partner, that can feel very threatening. We're going to focus on that. And the only thing we can see is what our partner's doing. Like physically, you cannot see yourself unless you're looking in the mirror. So all you're focused on is your partner. And that's what people are focused on. So I don't think they come into this intentionally blaming, but that is essentially what's happening.
Right. Or maybe even just venting, maybe blaming's the wrong word. Venting about the situation. And which can sound a lot like blaming.
It can, but it's like repeat griping about what the partner isn't doing or what they did that was upsetting.
So how do you facilitate your patients?
I call them clients mostly.
I was going to say client, and then I was like, wait, is it a patient? To take responsibility for their own behavior. Like, what are some prompts we could perhaps take from that to, look in the mirror at ourselves?
Look in the mirror. Yeah. So think about control and what you have control over versus what you have influence over versus all the things that you have neither influence nor control. And what you'll find is the only thing you can control is your behavior, and you can challenge your own thoughts. So whenever you're in this dynamic and it's not working for you, the question to start asking is, well, what can I do? Where's my responsibility in this? And what can I change about the interaction? And stop trying to exert control over your partner. A lot of us, when we feel that disconnection, makes us feel threatened. We try to exert control in an effort to reduce our anxiety. Because if you would just do it my way, everything would be fine.
Right. I'd be okay. If you just would have answered in this manner, I'd be okay.
Yeah. Exactly. And if you don't do it that way, you must not love me.
Yes. We're very quick to jump to that.
We are. It's one of the, I devoted a whole chapter this in my book on assume the best from your partner, because we are very quick to assume that, if they really loved me, they wouldn't be doing this. Therefore, they must not love me, or they must be doing this on purpose to upset me.
Yeah. It took me a long time to realize that a lot of the times it's really not about you.
Right?
Yeah. It's right. Interesting, actually. And I learned that lesson mostly from non-romantic friends. When things like being late, constantly late. I had a friend who was constantly late. And when she was younger, she would lie and tell me, I'm 5 minutes away, when she knew she was half an hour away because she didn't want to deal with the conflict. But then I was like, dude, it's worse. It's worse when you lie.
Yeah.
And she kept doing it. And I kept wondering, like, why does she keep doing this? And I was like, it's not about you. It's not about you at all. It's about her and her conflict avoidance style.
Right. And the level of shame she feels over her behavior and feeling judged, and it has nothing to do with you. Yeah. That is like one of the hardest things to learn. I go back to the book, The 4 Agreements, for that idea of don't take things personally.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that book?
I am. I read it when I was
Yeah,
really young. It's a great
I
book.
love that book. Yeah. But one of the 4 agreements is don't take things personally.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels personal in the moment. They ignored you. They were late repeatedly. They in lying to you about it, right? Like it hurts your feelings, disappoints you.
Yeah.
And how do you not take it personally?
Right.
And I think that's the question I battle with my clients.
Especially when you've had the conversation multiple times. And that's the thing. I kept thinking, I think that was such a great lesson for me in terms of like, she's really not doing it to hurt you deliberately. It's really not about you. And then when that kind of shifted, there was other things in her behavior that were really difficult to kind of battle with. And I was like, we're not in a romantic relationship. It's not about you. So, but it was such a great kind of reflection for me because I was like, well, this happens all the time in romantic relationships, but because it's romantic, it's like 10 times as upsetting, I guess, that you're just like, oh, you're doing this to me, and just that realization that's like, it's just everyone's fighting their own battle.
And I think to follow up on that idea, we really need to bring a lot of compassion both to other people and ourselves for all of these conflicts and disagreements and the things that we find hard to do. Because when it's hard for us to do, or we misbehave or do something poorly and thoughtlessly, we're fighting our own battle over that. And other people are going to be responding to that and fighting their battle over it. And we really need to be kind and towards ourselves and other people.
Okay, let's use that as an example, just because we're already kind of down this rabbit hole. If that was a romantic partner and we did talk to them and said, hey, when this happens, I get really upset. We've talked about this before. Is there a possibility you could make an effort to either just let me know where you're at or be on time? And that other person doesn't respond. How can we take responsibility for that, having had that conversation? Do you know what? And then moving forward through that without getting angry or upset or blaming?
Well, first, I think part of the compassion is it's going to upset us.
Right.
Like just acknowledge that it's going to upset you, that you've asked for this thing and your partner can't do it. I think the hard part is to not go into you're doing this on purpose. You must not like the story we tell ourselves about this, right? So, one of the little niche groups that I tend to work with are people who are in a relationship with somebody who has ADHD. Because ADHD has this really difficult element to it that makes it hard to be in relationship with. And it's unique to each person because each person has their own flavor of ADHD. But they will say often, I will fix this. I won't do this again. And then it'll happen days later, right? And it's likely a symptom of their ADHD.
Right.
And so in that scenario, what you want to do, and I'm using this as an example because I think then we can back up and make a more general statement about it, is like, know that they mean well and know that this is a symptom. And in the best scenario, you've had a conversation with them about that symptom and the dynamic that develops around that for you and how they respond to you and then how you respond to them and back and forth, and come up with a plan for how you're going to deal with it when that happens. So that's specific to ADHD. So if your partner does not have ADHD and you're still struggling with this issue, talk to them and say, okay, I've asked you for this 3 times. It hasn't gone well. You've tried, but it didn't work. Let's talk about how we can navigate this dynamic so that I don't stomp off mad or burst into tears or whatever the reaction is. Because I don't want to be mad at you, but this is a problem for me.
How often do people really have that level of self-awareness and have those difficult conversations and it work out?
Well, they don't happen naturally. They don't happen unless somebody like me comes along and says, let's have a conversation about this.
Right.
And so, you know what? And I don't do couples work, but I will sometimes bring the partner in to have a conversation so that to facilitate that.
It's interesting. I have this thing that I've been saying the last couple of years. When you date someone and they really see you, like sometimes there's some sort of dynamic in the relating. It's usually in my observation, it's to do with temperament. You have a similar type of temperament or a temperament that works together.
Mhm.
And what I find is that there's a level of ease in your nervous system, and you're like, this person sees me. So even if I
Mhm.
fuck up, they're going to do what we talked about before, which is kind of give me the benefit of the doubt. They're going to see who I really am and my intention.
Yeah.
And they're going to not give me a pass, but they're going to understand rather than
Yeah.
react.
Yes.
And it's interesting. I feel like, to me, that's kind of the definition of a good relationship is you see me, you really see me. It sounds
Yeah.
kind of corny, but I think they say it in Avatar, like, I see you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, yes, that's
Yeah.
it. Like, I see who
Yes.
you are. I see it's like seeing your intention, right? What
Mhm.
is your intention? And it's interesting as well. I've been noticing my behavior in certain relationships when things get tricky, or if I'm not kind of feeling it with someone, we naturally pull back
Mhm.
before our brain even knows. Our
Yeah.
body pulls back and knows. So it's
Yeah.
also about seeing our own intention
Mhm.
and being honest with ourselves that you know what? You're naturally pulling back from this person. Something's
Yes.
not working. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
they're bad. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
you don't have to feel bad about it.
And it may take you a minute to figure that out. Like, oh, I noticed I pulled back. Why?
Examining your own reaction.
Mhm. Yes.
And I guess
Yeah.
that can happen in long-term relationships too, right?
Yes. Yes. Well, I would expect it to happen. I think that the issue is how do the two of you navigate that? And that will help facilitate it being a long-term relationship. I often say to my clients, like, you don't really know what kind of a relationship you're in, if it's a new relationship, until you've had a good argument. And I don't
Right.
mean disagreeing over where to have dinner. I mean a good, heartfelt, I disagree with you argument, because that's how you're going to know how they are going to treat you when they're under stress and when they're feeling hurt or they're angry, because it's all roses up to that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting. That's where all the training comes in, all the self-work, all the growth, all the reflection work. That's where it comes in. I don't know who said it, but it's something like, you're only as good as your level of training. That's when it all
Mhm.
kicks in, right? Because that's when
Mhm.
you're heightened and you're like, wait a second, how can I solve this problem?
Right. And when you're heightened and when you're in that state of emotional reactivity, figuring out what to do is hard unless you already know how to respond to it, unless you've already been through that. Oh, I know what this is. This is me replaying my abandonment feelings from something that happened when I was a toddler. And I know that. So this is what I'm going to do instead.
Or in my case, when I was younger, I know you have a sharp tongue, talking to myself. I know you have a sharp tongue.
Yeah.
So just don't say anything yet.
Yes.
Just wait.
Yes.
And then think about it and then
Oh,
respond
yeah.
rather than react.
Yes. That
That
is a
helped.
great strategy.
That
Yes.
helped me a lot. That helped me a
Yeah.
lot. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah, stop talking.
Yes. Stop talking. I've actually said that to some of my clients. I'm like, if you start to feel upset, shut your mouth,
Right, right.
because
Yeah.
it gives you a second to breathe and figure out what to do.
Dr. John and Julie Gottman talk about flooding. Can we talk about
Mhm.
that? So when we're like, that's relevant to what we're talking about now is, people get flooded. What is flooding? What does that mean?
So, flooding is when your physiology sort of overwhelms your ability to be rational, and you can't think, or you're completely just in reactivity mode. And typically we can measure that. Your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up, you start breathing as if you're like under threat of some sort, which is that slow or that fast, shallow breathing. Your attention actually becomes very tunnel vision,
Mm-hmm.
so that you get hyper focused on one thing. It's hard to have perspective in that state.
Right,
So if either partner gets into that state, it's the conversation at that point isn't going to be productive.
right.
So I always encourage my clients to take a break. And that could be 10 minutes to just go breathe for a minute, or it could be the next day or 3 days later. If you do take a break, the key element to taking a break is telling your partner when you're going to come back to the conversation. I can't stress that enough, because people like, I just need a break, and then they run away and they never bring it up again. And that creates such an atmosphere of insecurity that we're no longer safe. I
Right.
can't bring up what I need to talk about because you're going to run away. You have to come back to it.
For some people, it's like, oh, great, I'm out now. That's it. I'm
Yeah.
just shutting down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then the stonewalling begins.
Yes. 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 I'm glad you brought up stonewalling, because I did want to make sure that we brought up the four horsemen, Gottman's four horsemen, because if you're thinking about, oh, what's the problem in my relationship? Those four horsemen are what you're going to look for. Mm-hmm. So you've got criticism, mm-hmm. and you've got defensiveness and contempt and stonewalling. Mm-hmm. And when we started talking, we were talking about blaming. And blaming is a form of defensiveness. So if you find yourself doing that, whoa. That's not just, oh, this is normal behavior. That's a problem. And one of the four horsemen signaling that this relationship has some unhealthy dynamics going on that could corrode the relationship.
So this is actually, I'm really glad we went down this path, because if we are experiencing one or many of the four horsemen mm-hmm. behaviors in our relationship, mm-hmm. is that something that we can transform? And where do we go from there?
Yes. Well, yes, you can. And so what you got there is an unhealthy dynamic, and you're both participating in it, just to be clear. And that's a hard one for some people, because you can clearly see what your partner's doing, but it's hard to see how you're enabling that, especially when you know that it isn't healthy. And so that we can have lots of conversations about what your role in that is. Mm-hmm. But there is a participation level. So what you need to do, as an individual, if you recognize that, you can try talking to your partner about it. I think once you've gotten down that road, you're probably going to need to consult a couples therapist or relationship coach to try to work through that. But to work with it individually, notice the pattern, when it starts happening, figure out how it makes you feel, and develop a plan for what you're going to do in response, right? What you're going to say, or what are you going to leave the room and take a break, essentially, right? Tell them when you're going to come back. Or, is there something else that you need to say or do to acknowledge that that's happening, so that you're interrupting that pattern and attempting to engage in a healthier way with the person. It's not easy.
No, it isn't.
I always feel like I say these things and it just rolls off my tongue, and it should be, just figure out what else to do and do something different. But when you're faced with that issue, it's very hard to make those changes. That's why it helps to have the plan ahead of time.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of listening to what you say and reflecting on what you spoke about before, is like, I like the plan, because it's like, that's what we're in control of, versus trying to influence somebody else's behavior. And I've certainly been there before, again and again, right? You kind of feel like you're smashing your head against a brick wall trying to change somebody else or influence somebody else, but it's really not your job to do that. But also it's impossible really to make somebody do something that you want at all times. Like with that, going back to that friend, I really sat with that discomfort for a lot of years and tried to figure it out. And it sounds really trivial saying it on here, but there was a lot of other things as well. And I was like, you know what? At the end of the day, I love her. I really, really love her.
Yes.
So accept her for how she is, and instead of getting upset all the time, go, okay, that's who she is. That's who she is. Now, I could ask her to change. Will she? Probably not.
Right.
But I could accept her, and I'm going to have a much better time.
Right.
And when I started accepting her and talking to her calmly, which took a while, then it really helped the relationship. And then I just was able to see the beauty. I was able to see her much more clearly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's that psychological flexibility that is the hallmark of your own mental health and well-being.
It took a while. And also it was much easier because I wasn't romantically involved with her. So I was able to be much more removed from it. I think when you're romantically involved with someone, these things are much harder because we do tend to make them more personal, and when they're not.
Yeah. Well, I think with our romantic partners, we're more vulnerable and it's easier to hurt us.
Right.
So every little thing is a bigger deal.
Right.
Right.
So let's talk about, part of when we say kind of like, I see you, I think in that I see you moment, which, comes and goes sometimes, there's an emotional intimacy in that moment or in that feeling of seeing somebody. Yeah. And it does. And when I say intimacy, we think, touching and physical intimacy, but there's a real kind of envelope of comfort in that intimacy. So how do we increase that? And I guess that, like what you said before about the vulnerability, how do we be brave? And what are some little bridges we can build in our own behavior to build that vulnerability and to build that emotional intimacy?
Right. So vulnerability is about being open. In order to be open, it's kind of like, your armor opens up and you could be hurt, right? So you have to take that chance or you're not ever going to be able to have that true connection with your partner. At the end of the day, what we all crave, that ICU piece, is to feel like the other person understands us and who we are and where we're coming from and how we feel. Like we feel seen and heard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to validate our partner and have them validate us gets us there really quickly, right? So learn how to validate your partner, and that will help increase the connection that you've got.
Mm-hmm.
And validating your partner does not mean you agree with them. And I think that's one sticking point people run up against is like, well, I get where they're coming from, but I completely disagree. Well, that doesn't matter. What matters is you get where they're coming from.
Right.
And saying, I completely understand why you would have that reaction doesn't mean that you feel like it's okay that they have that perspective. So it starts with that. It starts with opening yourself up and sharing, and then having your partner validate you, and then they share and you validate them. And that's a big piece of that emotional connection that we're all craving.
Yeah. I want to quickly mention something that just happened to a friend of mine, which I think is really common. He had hooked up with this woman a couple of times. That was all it was. And then recently she invited him away for the weekend, just out of circumstance. It wasn't like a planned thing. It was like, oh, hey, you're in the area. You want to come to my parents' cabin on the lake. So parents were there and he was there and he really enjoyed his time. Nothing happened. And he was like, he messaged me and he's like, oh, what do you think? Do you have any advice? Like a few days, I gave him the advice. And a few days later, he messaged me and showed me the conversation they had. And she basically came back and said, hey, I don't want to give you the wrong idea. It's really great that we can just hang out as friends, right? And he was totally crushed. And I mention this because it's common that we open ourselves up, or it's not even like they were just hanging out, right? He didn't even necessarily show any vulnerability, but it's like every time those little things happen, those micro hurts, our armor gets tighter and tighter.
Yes.
And so how do we, if we're taking responsibility for our own behavior, part of that as well is being brave and having that courage. If we keep repeatedly getting these experiences that we perceive as negative, how do we open up? How do we begin to try and even be vulnerable if we're constantly going to be hurt? Hi there, this is Talia, and I'd like to make a request. If this episode resonated with you and you found value in our conversation, could you show your support by hitting the subscribe or follow button? It's a simple way to let the platforms and us know you appreciate this content. By following the podcast, you'll ensure you'll never miss out on an episode, and your support really means a lot to us. Thank you for being part of our journey.
I think the hurt of that kind of situation, because that happens a lot with people, to us, it means that we weren't good enough, that there's something wrong with us. And even if we're not saying that consciously, like your friend might understand that he's fine, it's just got his hopes up because he was attracted to her. And that attraction and that hope makes him vulnerable to her saying no. And then the story becomes, well, what's wrong with me? Am I not good enough? So we get disappointed, and then we kind of pile a little bit more hurt on that because we feel like we must not be good enough in some way. And there's a lot of reasons why people do that, and a lot of circumstances that have nothing to do with you, to go back to don't take things personally, right? And I think for us to know that if we're going to open ourselves up, we are going to be vulnerable to being disappointed or hurt, and take the compassion and then knowing that that's not about us, so that we work hard to not tell ourselves that story that we're not good enough. And I know you kind of get a callus there. It's hard, but know that about yourself. And maybe you do have to put a little more intention into it and say something the first time, that first I love you. So it's really hard, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe you have to put some intention to it and know that you're risking it. But that if it doesn't work out, you'll understand why you're hurt and understand that that's not because you aren't good enough, that there's lots of reasons why that happens.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We always jump to the conclusion that makes us the bad person.
Yeah, we do.
I read something the other day on Instagram,
Yeah.
wealth of wisdom, that,
Yes.
when a relationship ends, we're always quick to blame, or either blame them or blame ourselves, or if only I'd done this, if only hadn't have said that thing, then we'd still be together. But the thing is, the truth is that sometimes you're just not compatible,
Right.
and that's what they said. They were like, sometimes you're just not compatible. Sometimes there's no bad guy. It's just,
Right.
it didn't work, and it's okay. You both can have those lessons and move forward, or you want different things, right? Why can't
Exactly.
it be beautiful and you move on and have something else?
And take away from the relationship the beauty and appreciate it and be grateful for it, and not sad that it ended, or creating a story that there was something wrong with you, or there's something in him that was wrong.
Right. So I guess we just have to be brave and have courage and be that person and be vulnerable.
Yes. And if you aren't scared, you don't have courage.
Yeah.
So it's okay to be scared.
Everybody's scared.
Everybody's scared. And we're all fighting our own battles, and we need to have compassion for ourselves and other people.
It's interesting, when we talk about compassion, we often just think about the other person, but it's also about having compassion towards ourselves as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're a person too.
Okay. So we've talked about some really important tools today. We talked about catching yourself and stopping talking.
Yes.
We've talked about being brave, being vulnerable, seeking help, taking responsibility.
Taking responsibility, like know your pattern, right? And know when it starts.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this work requires us to be really honest with ourselves. Only in the last kind of couple of years have I realized, I always think I'm being honest with myself. But then when you look deeper, it's kind of like, I call it like 5 levels deep. You want to go 5 levels deep. So you ask yourself the question, answer it, ask yourself this question again. We think we're being honest, but how do we really know if we're being honest with ourselves?
I think at some point we're going to get to an answer we don't like, but we know is true. It's like, I want to be like outgoing and fun loving and always say the right things. And you're not always. And if you can acknowledge like the parts that are not as polished or perfect, that's a form of being honest with yourself and accepting. Like, I think we need to accept that we're not perfect, and we do have flaws. We do get it wrong. Sometimes we hurt other people, even when we're well-intentioned. And to be able to be accepting of that, I think, is a really powerful truth. The problem that people have when they're trying to do that is they can't stop at recognizing what went wrong. They have to add a judgment.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great distinction.
Yeah. So if you can say, oh, I messed up. I offered my friend who isn't drinking a drink. Like, how thoughtless, right? I know she's not drinking. I know she's been struggling with this. And she comes over to my house and I say, can I get you a beer or a glass of wine? Right? Okay, I screwed up. I was really thoughtless there. And what can we say to ourselves about that? All sorts of things about how horrible we are for being so thoughtless. And yet you're human and you're going to make mistakes. And this is a recent development, and you kind of forgot because this was a pattern you guys had. So acknowledge it and don't tell yourself the story that you're thoughtless or selfish. Just say, I screwed up and I'm sorry.
Right. Because that's the part that we really dwell on, is not what happened, what the story we tell ourselves about it.
Yes. Yes. And some of us can get very like in our head about it. Like,
yes. I was just going to say that, when you're a child, I can describe this because I remember it happening as a child. When you get into trouble and then it's like this black cloud comes over your head And you're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I'm such a terrible person. I'm so bad. And obviously, when you grow up, it's not that bad. Like the black cloud's not kind of as prevalent, but sometimes it can happen. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm just this. What are these people going to think of me? I'm this horrible person.
Right.
And it's like, wait. What actually happened? What was the action that happened
Mhm.
rather than all this stuff that I'm telling myself about
All
me?
of the meaning that you're placing on it, right?
Right.
That isn't there inherent in the situation. You're
Right.
adding it. And
Mm-hmm,
that's
mm-hmm.
the problem, that story we tell ourselves about what happened.
Right. It's interesting. I used to be a behavioral therapist, and my supervisor would always say, when you're taking data, you're writing down the behavior of the child.
Mhm.
Don't put your judgment on it. Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, how do I do that? And she said, well, I want you to imagine you're on the phone with me describing the behavior. So instead of saying he looks really anxious, like we don't know that he's anxious, talk about he's stamping his feet, he's yelling, his face is red, he's
Yes.
he's
Yes.
running around in circles. You know, it's
Yes.
like what is actually happening rather
Mhm.
than what you think your interpretation
Yes.
of what he's going through.
That's a really good way to think about that. Yes.
Yeah, it really,
Yeah.
really helped me kind of. And I was like, I can use this in all areas of my life. I was on a date not too long ago and something happened and I got upset. And he said, you're upset. And I said, no, I'm not. And then when I look back, I was like, I was upset. I was upset.
Yes.
I didn't think I wanted to be upset in the moment, but I was upset. And
Mhm.
and he, obviously was observing the behavior.
Yes.
So he
Yes.
saw that I was upset.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting to there trying to tell myself the opposite story of
Yeah.
what's actually
Yeah.
happening.
That sounds like if I say to you I'm upset, then I'm going to be vulnerable, and I don't want to be vulnerable right
Yeah.
now.
And I think it was just something happened and it was just a shock. I just wasn't expecting
Mhm.
it. And I probably felt a bit embarrassed that I was upset because I was like, oh, it was kind of like this thing was sprung on me. And I was like,
Yeah.
I haven't had a minute to process.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, let's wrap this up I want to talk about like, when do people know that they're progressing with you? Like they come to you, they're in this state, they want to work on their relationship, they're unhappy, they don't want to leave, preferably. How do they know that? How do they know when they're making progress? How do we, which part of what we're doing is working?
So when I start working with somebody, my first thing is to try to create a sense of safety in the relationship with me. So I do a lot of normalizing and validating what's happening with the person. From that place of safety, then I start teaching them about the dynamic that's happening that they're describing to me, what their role is, and what's likely happening with their partner. They know their partner, they can help fill in the blanks for me, but I've seen a lot of dynamics and I can tell when somebody's feeling angry or ashamed of themselves or, big emotions, right? And so we can take a look at what's that dynamic. And then I can help them figure out, what's the story you're telling yourself? What are your limiting beliefs about this? How can you communicate differently? So I teach them things and then they start doing things. They give it a try and it kind of works. It shifts in how the dynamic goes between them and their partner. And it kind of gives them a little courage to keep going, right? Because of this, there might be hope here because I could see a little shift. And over time, because I think for some people, especially if we're dealing with a lot of childhood wounds, and those can be kind of hard to get at times because we're pretty well defended against those. It can take some time, but I'll see the person starting to talk differently about their role in the dynamic. And as that progresses and they're able to define what they're responsible for, talk about what happened, if it didn't go well, what did they do that was their old pattern, and what are we going to try for the new pattern? And they can more accurately describe what's going on with their partner, because initially that's often quite difficult. We see little baby steps going in the direction of a better relationship.
I think it's even that thing of, I am in control of my own behavior. That
Yeah.
realization. I remember years ago, something was happening with my partner at the time, and my therapist said, I just want you to practice not being pissed off at him this weekend. So no matter what he does, I just want you to not be pissed off at him. Just let him be himself and don't be pissed off. And I was like, okay, great. And it was such a great exercise because I was like, no matter what happens, I'm just not going to get angry. Just don't take, and it was such a great kind of exercise because I was like, oh, I am in control of this. I don't need to get upset. Yes, I still feel it, but I'm not reacting.
Yes.
And there was such a lesson in that.
And when, just out of curiosity, when you decided not to be angry with him, although you were still a little upset, how long did the upset last?
A lot less.
A lot less. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot less. It was a very long time ago. It was like more than 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah. So
But it was a lot less. And it was that thing of, it was kind of like a shortcut to I see you. Because I'm still friends with him today, actually. And he still does a lot of the behaviors that pissed me off. And it's just a part of who he is. And, instead of fighting it and being like upset at him all the time, it's like, just accept that that's who he is. And you can either love it or you can not love it.
Right. Yes.
And then you get to decide. That's your choice.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been having a lot of conversations with people about recently is this idea of getting hooked. So when your boyfriend would do something that would normally piss you off and your therapist said, don't get pissed off, what you had to kind of metaphorically do is not allow yourself to be hooked by his behavior.
Right.
When you don't get hooked, then when there's no attachment to the being pissed off, it will fade usually within about 90 seconds. If we're not feeding that emotional reaction in some way, if we don't grab a hold of it and wrestle with it and blame other people for it and talk about it and all the stuff we do, if we don't do that, it will just fade. And then we can go about what we were doing.
Yeah. And just pick the nice parts and focus on the
just
great
pick the nice parts. Yeah. And you know what? I think in relationship, it really helps sometimes to wear rose-colored glasses and not pick on the little things.
I just was watching an interview yesterday with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck about Good Will Hunting. He said when they were writing it, Ben said, judge me on the things I get right, not the things I get wrong. And he was saying how significant that was. And I thought, yeah, that is really significant. We always focus on what's not going right instead of what's focusing on what's going right. And interesting in behavioral therapy, when we do this particular type of therapy that I was doing with the children, the supervisor asked once, what's the goal of the therapy we're doing? Are we increasing behavior or are we decreasing behavior? I was like, increasing. We're increasing good behavior. We're rewarding good behavior. And then the bad, quote unquote, bad behavior, the undesirable behavior drops away, not the other way around.
Right.
And and it's so easy to just be like, pound that undesirable behavior down instead of reinforce the good behavior.
Yes. Yes.
Dr. Julie, is there any last words you'd like to share with us on this topic before we wrap up?
Well, I just want to be very encouraging because I think if people do recognize that they've got issues, and even if they're the only one working on it, they can make some changes there. It's not, you don't have to get the other person involved, but if you can get them involved, that's even better.
Right.
Yeah.
And if people want to find out more about you and get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Well, my website, drjulieshafer.com. I've also got a book available on most online bookstores, Loved Relationship Rules for Women Who Thought They Knew the Rules.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all think we know the rules. Nope.
Yeah, we do. And everybody's doing them wrong.
Yeah. Dr. Julie, thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thanks for being here.
Yes, it has. Thanks for having me.
This podcast is a Rebel Love production. To find the links mentioned in this episode, go to rebellove.com/let love begin. That was awesome.
Oh, awesome.
That was like one of my favorite podcasts.
Oh, good.